Hey Java developers, great news. JDK 21 has been released this week. Alone, JDK 21 is a huge release including 15 JEPs. Of course, that in some ways undersells this release, as some of those JEPs bring substantial changes like virtual threads and generational GGC. And of course, JDK 21 is an LTS release.
Java 21 is no long-term support version.
Sorry, release with LTS offerings. So many of you watching this video might eventually find yourself using JDK 21, hopefully sooner rather than later. In this episode of the Inside Java Newscast, I will cover all the changes included in JDK 21, well, at least what's in the release notes and some articles published by our engineers for JDK 21. If you want to learn more about some of these changes, be sure to check out our Road to JDK 21 series where many of these changes are explored in more depth. Also in the description is a link to the JDK 21 release notes and the aforementioned articles, as well as links to some other videos we have done that cover some of these key topics in more depth. With that, let's get started. Naturally, we will start with the headline changes, the JEPs. As mentioned in the intro, this is a big release with 15 JEPs included. And it's not just fluff. A few of the JEPs are actually fairly substantial changes. JEP 431 introduces sequence collections. This is a new hierarchy of interfaces added to the collections hierarchy for collections with a defined and counted order like array list, sorted set, and others, making tasks like finding the last element in a collection or going through a collection in reverse easier. JEP 439 adds generational capability to the Z garbage collector. To use this, you will need to use the VM arguments plus use GGC and plus Z generational. Not using the second argument will default you to using the previously standard single generational ZGC. JEPs 440 and 441, record patterns and pattern matching for splits respectively, represents the end of the first major chapter of Project Amber covering pattern matching. Record patterns allow for the easy deconstruction of records, and pattern matching for switch, well, brings the ease and benefits of pattern matching to switch statements. It can also pair nicely with serial hierarchies. JEP 444 is a big change many Java developers have been waiting for, the promotion of virtual threads to a final feature. Virtual threads introduce a lightweight thread model to Java, and if you want to know more, we have a video too on that topic. JEP 452 adds key encapsulation mechanism API, and well, I'll leave this to our own Anna Maria, who just did a video on this topic. Two of the JEPs included in JDK 21 were about deprecating or removing features. JEP 449 deprecated the Windows 32-bit x86 binary for removal. JEP 451 prepares to disallow dynamic loading of agents. With this change, loading a dynamic agent will now produce a warning logging message indicating this change is coming. 7 JEPs cover preview or incubator features. JEP 430, string templates, introduces the concept of string interpolation to Java. This should provide benefits to Java developers when composing strings over the traditional methods of using the plus operator, string builder, or string format. JEP 443, unnamed patterns and variables, is the start of the next chapter of pattern matching. Unnamed patterns and variables will reduce the overhead of working with record patterns, particularly in records with a lot of fields or components in proper records lingo, by allowing developers to use a underscore for components of a record they are not intending to use. JEP 445, unnamed classes and instance main methods. Back in September of 2022, hard to believe this has already been a year, Brian Getz published a post paving the on-ramp, which covered the desired changes to the Java language aimed at making it easier to learn and use for new developers. JEP 445 represents the first step on implementing that vision, introducing changes to make it easier to find a main method. I'm personally looking forward to further changes as a part of paving the on-ramp, not only to make Java a more popular choice for new programmers, but it also ties in nicely with Java's increasingly rich scripting story, something Nikolai has covered recently. JEP 446 and JEP 453, scope values and structure concurrency, are both in preview and part of the major initial trifecta of features for Project Loom. Of course, we saw virtual threads introduced as a final feature with this release. Scope values and structure concurrency will play an important story in fulfilling Project Loom's initial goals. Once again, we have a number of videos on this subject, so I won't go into it too much farther here. There are two Project Panama JEPs. JEP 442, Foreign Function and Memory API, is in third preview and continues to incorporate refinements based on feedback from the Java user community. JEP 448, Vector API, is in sixth Incubator. The Vector API will remain in Incubator status until Project Valhalla starts getting closer to delivery, as it fundamentally impacts the implementation of the Vector API. Let's now switch to some of the minor new features coming in JDK 21. Processes started by runtime.exec and process builder can now be enabled to log the command, arguments, directory, stack trace, and process ID. Logging of the information is enabled with the logging level of Java Lang process builder debug or trace. Calls to the Java Lang.system exit and runtime exit are logged to the logger named Java Lang runtime with a logging level of system.logger.debug. The following methods have been added to the Java Lang character for obtaining emoji character properties. regex has been updated to handle the new emoji related properties added to Java Lang character, like in this example which returns true. The java.net HTTP client is now autoclosable and has had the on-screen methods added. The instances returned by HTTP client new HTTP client and the instances built from HTTP client new builder provide a best effort implementation for these methods. Be sure to check the JBS issue for the additional details. JDK 21 now supports GB 18030 2022 for Chinese character encoding. This does have some incompatibilities with GB 18030 2000. To handle this, there is the new system property JDK charset GB 18030, which can now be set to 2022 or 2000. The G1 garbage collector is now Papa Roach's favorite garbage collector. Papa Roach lead singer Jacoby Sadix, seen here trying to comprehend a regex, appreciates that G1 will now attempt a last resort of moving humongous objects to avoid an out-of-memory situation. This will now only occur after a previous full GC failed to free enough memory. On the subject of full collections in G1 will make sure that the Java heap is more compact after full collection, reducing fragmentation a little. On applications with thousands of threads, in previous releases, a significant amount of time of the pods could be spent tearing down and setting up the TLabs. These two phases have been parallelized. The JFR command line tool has added the new view command, which improves the experience of analyzing JFR recordings from the command line. I cover more about this change in this Inside Java Newscast episode, as well as a few other changes from JFR in JDK 21. New properties and an enhanced syntax has been added for certificate, CRL, OCSP, connect, and readout timeouts. This is a fairly involved change, and you either do care about it or don't. For those that do, be sure to check out the JBS issue for additional details. The HSS LMS signature verification as defined in RFC 8554 is now supported. The Sun JCE provider is enhanced with additional PBE S2 cipher and MAC algorithms, such as those using SHA 512/224 and SHA 512/256 message digest, specifically these new callers. The Sun PKCS11 security provider now supports password-based cryptography algorithms for cipher, MAC, and secret key factory service types. The full list of algorithms is in JDK 8308719. Sun PKCS11 can now be used for privacy and integrity in PKCS 12 key stores. A new system property named org JCP XML D6 secure validation has been added. It can take a Boolean value with a default value of true for enabling or disabling XML signature secure validation mode. The XML signature implementation has been updated to Santorio 3.0.2. The main new feature is support for EDDSA. Related, the here function might eventually be removed in the future and can be optionally disabled by setting the system property JDK XML dsig here function supported to false. The new lint option, this escape, has been added to Java C to warn about calls to overridable methods in the constructor body, which might result in access to a partially constructed object from subclasses. The JCell tool for interactive exploration of Java code has been enhanced with a new predefined script, tooling. The tooling script provides direct access to the JDK's command line tools such as Java C, Java Doc, and Java P from within JCell. The XShowSettings launcher option has been enhanced to print with the TZ data version configured with the JDK. The TZ data version is displayed as part of the locale show settings option. Several changes have been made to the JAX-P configuration files. Again, be sure to check out the JBS issue on this, as the details on this change are more than we have time to cover here. Several features have been removed as a part of the JDK 21 release. Java.io.files canonical path cache has been removed. This feature has historically been used for performance reasons, but had some correctness issues and has been disabled by default since JDK 12. The method Java lang thread group.allow thread suspension has been removed in this release. It has been deprecated and no-op since JDK 1.2, so long time coming. The system property java.compiler has been removed from the list of standard system properties and will now print a warning message stating that if present in system properties. The Java lang compiler class has been removed. Its implementation in the hotspot VM is a no-op that only prints a warning messages and has been deprecated and marked for removal since JDK 9. The jar index feature has been dropped from the jar file specification. The feature has been disabled since JDK 18. As a part of the change, the jar tool will now output a warning message if the -i or -- generate index options are used. The class JavaX Management Remote RMI IOPS Server Impl has been removed. This class has been deprecated and its constructor changed to throw unsupported operation exception since JDK 9. The G1 hot card cache has been removed. Performance testing has shown that after improvements to the concurrent refinement control introduced in JDK 20, it does not contribute to performance. The parallel class loading workaround option, enable wait for parallel load, deprecating JDK 20, has been removed. A more proper way of handling this was introduced in JDK 7. Be sure to check the JBS issue for additional details if this impacts you. The metaspace reclaim policy option has been obsoleted and will now only produce a warning message when used. The on-screen root certificate from SIGCOMM Trust System has been removed from the CA Search key store. The jar signer options alt signer and alt signer path have been removed, along with underlying content signer API in the ComSun jar signer package. The mechanism was deprecated in JDK 9 and marked for removal in JDK 15. Several features have also been marked as deprecated in JDK 21. Implementation support for AWT/Swing using GTK2 on Linux is now deprecated for removal. GTK4 was released in December of 2020, and the GTK2 toolkit is reaching the end of its life. GTK3 is a current default. Swing applications which opt into using GTK2 by setting JDK.GDK version 2 will now see a warning message. com.sun.nio.file sensitivity watch event modifier has been deprecated and is marked for removal. The constants in this enum were used with the polling-based watch service implementation on macOS to set the interval when polling files for changes. Users now see a warning message if they specify either compat or JRE locale data with the java.locale provider's system property and call some locale-sensitive operations. Compat was provided for migration to the CLDR locale data at the time of JDK 9, where it became the default locale data. Users are encouraged to migrate to the CLDR locale data. The JMX subject delegation feature is deprecated and marked for removal in a future release. This feature is enabled by the method javax management remote JMX connector.get mbean server connection, which is deprecated for removal. If a client application needs to perform operations as on or behalf of multiple entities, it will make multiple calls to the JMX connector factory.connect and to the get mbean server connection method on the returned JMX connector. There are a few known issues that are part of JDK 21. This section provides information and, if applicable, workarounds to these known issues. JDK 8132995 introduced an unintended regression when using instances returned by java.util.regex matcher.match This happens on java.util.regex patterns containing lookaheads and lookabehinds that in turn contain groups. If these are located outside of the match, it results in a throwing string index out of bounds exception when accessing these groups. See JDK 8312976 for an example. Running the JVM with GDC enabled and non-default value of object alignment in bytes may lead to JVM crashes or incorrect execution. The issue is caused by incorrect JIT compiler optimization of the Java lang object clone method for this configuration. If using GDC with a non-default value of object alignment bytes is desired, JIT compilation of Java lang object clone can be disabled with the command line option plus unlock diagnostic VM options and disable intrinsic _clone. The JVM can hang under an uncommon condition that involves the JVM running out of heap memory, the GC just starting a relocation phase to reclaim memory, and a JVM thread local handshake asking to relocate an object. Swing components such as JLabels and JButtons, which display application text, will try to interpret that text as HTML. The HTML processing of the text for these components will no longer recognize the object tag, but this can be re-enabled by setting swing HTML object true. The behavior of the method java.io.file.listroots on Microsoft Windows has changed in this release so that the returned array includes a file object for all available disk drives. This differs from the behavior between JDK 10 and JDK 20, where this method filtered out disk drives that were not accessible or did not have media present. Object input stream read object now throws a stream corrupted exception instead of a negative array size exception when reading an array with a negative array size from a corrupted object input stream. Since JDK 13, executing commands in a sub-process used by the POSIX spawn launching mechanism by default on Linux. In cases where the parent JVM process terminates abnormally before the handshake between the JVM and the newly created JSpawn helper process has been completed. JSpawn helper can hang indefinitely on JDK 13 to JDK 20. This issue is fixed with JDK 21. The release notes go into considerable more detail on this issue, so be sure to check them out if interested. The thread sleep method is now able to perform sub-millisecond sleeps on POSIX platforms. Before this change, a non-zero nanos argument would round up to a full millisecond. While the precision is improved on most POSIX systems, the actual sleep duration is still subject to the precision and accuracy of system faculties. Maintainers of applications that do network multitasking or use the Java.NET Network Interface API should note that the names that the JDK assigns to network interfaces on Windows have changed in this release. Again, here the release notes go into greater detail on this change, and I would recommend checking them out. File channel.transformFrom has changed in this release to support transferring bytes from a source channel to a file at a file position that is beyond the file's current size. File transfer to transfer from was previously specified to not transfer any bytes when called with a file position greater than a file's current size. If the system property file.encoding is set on the command line to the name of a charset that is not in the java.base module, then the JDK will ignore it and default to UTF-8. In JDK 17 and older, the JDK would attempt to locate the charset even though it was never supported or documented to change the value of the system property in these releases. Since JDK 18, it is possible to set the system property on the command line to the default UTF-8 or compat. Setting it to any other value is not defined. The BCP 47 Unicode extension for the strength and normalization collation settings are now supported in the java.text collator. If the locale passed to the getInstanceFactory method contains KS or KK collation settings, the created collator instance is set to have the strength and decomposition modes corresponding to the specified strength and normalization settings. Swedish collation rules have been modified to reflect the modern sorting for the language. Collation in Swedish now distinguishes V and W as well as sorting alphabetically. The change can be seen in this example. Refer to support variant collations for more details. Java.text.collator now supports multiple collations for a locale. The type of collation may be specified with the Unicode collation identifier if the runtime provides an implementation. The computation of the time between java.time instance using the following methods has been corrected. The implementation computing the number of units between instance as of JDK 18 did not propagate, carry, and borrow between seconds and nanoseconds when computing milliseconds and microseconds. The implementation of java.util.formatter for double and float conversions to decimal is now aligned with the one in double to string, which was changed in JDK 19. There are some edge cases to be aware of where outcomes might slightly differ. Check the release notes for examples and details. Java.util.zip file has been updated to provide additional validation for zip64 extra fields when opening a zip file. This validation may be disabled setting the system property jdk.util.zip.disable zip64 extra field validation to true. Locale data based on the Unicode Consortium's CLDR has been upgraded to version 43. The JDK locale data now employs coverage levels.txt, including the basic and above level locale data, in addition to the data already existing in prior JDK releases for compatibility. For detailed locale changes, please refer to the Unicode Consortium's CLDR release notes. Maintainers of JVM TI agents should note that JVM TI now specifies that the thread start and thread end events are not sent for virtual threads. This is a change from when virtual threads were in preview for JDK 19 and 20. When the feature was in preview, these events were sent for virtual threads even when the can support virtual threads capability was not enabled. Agents that wish to be notified when virtual threads start or terminate need to add the can support virtual threads capability and enable the virtual thread start and virtual thread end events. The JNI getCreatedJavaVMs method will now only return a fully initialized VM. In previous versions, partially initialized VMs would be returned. It is important that the programmer checks that the returned number of VMs in NVMs is greater than 0 before trying to use any VM buff entries. The JDK RPM installer will remove incorrectly constructed entries of Java and Java-C groups registered by older Oracle JDK RPM installers from the alternatives before registering new Java and Java-C entries. Once again, the release notes expand upon the ramifications of this change, so be sure to check them if this might affect you. The installation directory of Oracle JDK Debian packages has changed from user lib jvm jdk feature to user lib jvm jdk feature Oracle Arch. The Oracle JDK Debian package registers JEXEC as an interpreter for launching .jar files from the command line. The Oracle JDK Debian package configures storage for Java Preference API in the /etc.java.systemprefs directory. The Oracle JDK Debian package registers JDK commands from the update alternatives command and supplies the user lib jvm jdk Oracle Arch jinfo file for the update Java alternatives command. The following root certificates have been added to the CA Certs Trust Store. The final keyword was added to the on-screen static methods Java Security Cert Store Get Default Types, Java X.NET SSL Key Manager Store Factory Get Default Algorithms, and Java X.NET.SSL Trust Manager Factory Get Default Algorithm methods. The key tool, GenSecKey, and import pass commands have been updated to warn users when weak password-based encryption algorithms are specified by the keyalg option. The macOS Keychain Store implementation now exposes certificates with proper trust in user domain, admin domain, or both. Before, only the user domain was considered. Furthermore, if there exists a deny entry for a particular purpose in a certificate's trust settings in either domain, the certificate will now not be part of the macOS Keychain Store. The Sun JCE implementation for Cypher objects using the Cha-Cha-20 and Cha-Cha-20 Poly 1305 algorithms will now allow key nonce reuse when used in decrypt mode. This algorithm aligns with algorithms with the current Sun JCE AES GCM decrypt mode behavior regarding key nonce reuse. All encrypt mode key nonce reuse prohibitions remain unchanged from their current behavior. When initializing the DH key pair generator implementation of the Sun PKCS11 provider with the key size argument, it looks up the default DH parameters to initialize the underlying native PKCS11 implementation. If the key pair generator implementation is initialized with the DH parameter spec object having a negative private exponent length, this invalid negative value will be overridden with a default value. The JDK implementation of the TLS 1.2 now uses a default Diffie-Hellman key size of 2048 bits when a TLS DHE cipher suite is negotiated and either the client or server does not support FFDHE, which can negotiate stronger key size. The JDK TLS implementation now supports FFDHE and it is enabled by default. As a workaround, users can revert to the previous size by setting the JDK.TLS ephemeral DH key size system property to 1024 at their own risk. Annotation processing by Java-C is enabled by default, including when no annotation processing configuration options are present. Implicit annotation processing by default may be disabled in a future release, possibly as early as JDK 22. To alert Java-C users of this possibility in JDK 21, Java-C prints a note if implicit annotation processing is being used. A new compiler lint flag output file class enables detection of output file classes. An output file class is when the compiler intends to write two different input files, but due to the behavior of the operating system, these files end up having been written to the same underlying file. This usually happens due to case-insensitive file systems, like in this example, but can also happen when a file system normalizes names, like this example with macOS. The Java language specification does not allow extra semicolons to appear between import statements, yet the compiler has been allowing them, which has now been fixed. As a result, a program like this, which would previously have been compiled successfully, will now generate an error. Prior to JDK 21, the Java-C compiler was emitting some potentially ambiguous overload warnings enabled by the excellent overloads option. Prior to JDK 21, the Java-C compiler did not always mark method parameters as synthetic or mandated. Starting with JDK 21, the Java-C compiler emits the method parameters attribute in the class file when applicable. The attribute stores information on whether or not parameters are synthetic or mandated. This change applies to all release and target versions supported by Java-C, since all current supported releases targets have the method parameters attribute defined. Prior to JDK 21, the Java-C compiler was not allowing annotations with the noTarget annotation to be applied to type parameter declarations. This is a bug in the Java-C compiler in versions prior to 21. For these last three issues, the release notes provide a lot more detail than I want to cover in this video. If you think any of these changes might impact you, be sure to check out the release notes and the relevant JBS issues. Differences between the Oracle JDK and OpenJDK binaries try to be minimized, but there are a few. Oracle JDK offers installers, MSI, RPM, Deb, etc., which not only place the JDK binaries in your system, but also contain updates, rules, and in some cases handle some common configurations like set common environmental variables such as Java Home in Windows and establish file associations. OpenJDK is offered only as a compressed archive. Usage logging is only available in Oracle JDK. Oracle JDK requires that third-party cryptographic providers be signed with a Java Cryptographic Extension JCE code signing certificate. OpenJDK continues allowing the usage of unsigned third-party crypto providers. The output of Java version is different. Oracle JDK returns Java and includes the Oracle-specific identifier. OpenJDK returns OpenJDK and does not specify the Oracle-specific identifier. Oracle JDK 17 and later are released under the Oracle No-Fee Terms and Conditions license. OpenJDK is released under the JPL v2 WCP. Oracle JDK distributes FreeType under the FreeType license, and OpenJDK does so under GPL v2. Oracle JDK has the Java cup and Steam icons, and OpenJDK has Duke icons. Oracle JDK source code includes Oracle proprietary confidential, use is subject to license terms. Source code distributed with OpenJDK refers to the JPL license terms instead. Well, that's it for this episode of the Inside Java Newscast. JDK 21 was a huge release, and be sure to check out our Road to JDK 21 series and come back soon as we will be releasing more content on JDK 21 and eventually JDK 22 and more news about the Java ecosystem. If you liked this video, share it with your friends. If you didn't like this video, share it with your enemies. Leave us a comment if you want to provide us some feedback, but until later, happy coding!